What's your take on that, and how do you kind of use Asha to perhaps drive some of the influence for the business?
Yeah, so I mean, I think this is really important and obviously very topical. But I think the important line that I like to repeat is that you're probably not going to lose your job to AI, but you might lose your job to someone else who knows how to use AI.
Yes.
And it's the same. It's the same for individuals. It's the same for engineers, and it's also the same for entire businesses. Right? Like, it's unlikely that a piece of software is going to, immediately take over your business, and that AIs are going to be like running all of it. Maybe someday, and I think that's likely. But in the near term, in the next few years, businesses that get ahead of this AI, businesses that start to think digital, businesses that really are able to see as new things are possible, how to seize those opportunities. Those businesses are going to take business away from businesses that don't. And there's really no way around it. The entire world's connected at this point, and I think we have to accept that. And I think it's important for each person, for each business, to do what they can to understand where things are going. Because I believe there's some things that we're already seeing. I use AI every day. I'm sure you do too. I'm sure a lot of the listeners here do as well.
Don't get me started.
And I think that there's like entire areas that are easy to understand how they're being taken over. But like I mentioned, I'm studied economics. I'm a big believer in history, especially the history of economics and the history of technology. And when when the Industrial Revolution was hitting, you had Karl Marx most famously writing that, the world's going to end because capitalism is going to own everything, and the capitalists are going to take it, and like everyone else is going to have nothing. And he was not able to see that actually the consumer surplus created was going to create new types of leisure. It was going to decrease the length of the work week, increase access to all sorts of healthcare. It's going to enable innovation to spread across the world.
Absolutely.
Even after Rockefeller was figuring out how to chemically take different parts of petroleum. Initially, the only thing they knew what to use oil for was basically lubricating machinery and certain types of lighting. But then they figured out, Rockefeller worked with chemists to refine it. He did that, but then Russia figured out how to do it, and there was already competitors popping up in Russia. People were imitating his barrels and offering an inferior product. And so even, this is 150 years ago now. Innovation diffuses very, very quickly.
In the meantime, GDP has multiplied by 100. Our economy has produced all sorts of conveniences, and again, expanded and extended the longevity of possibly everybody on Earth. To your point, it's a net positive to have all these breakthroughs, and AI is a big one, possibly as big as the internet. The jury's still out on that one for me, at least, but I think they're basically going to be very similar in terms of impact. In terms of economic impact, possibly more. In terms of technology breakthrough, it's probably about the same for me. And again, just putting the convenience and the fact that everybody can access every single piece of information and reach anybody on Earth, that seems a pretty big deal to me. But everything that you're doing manually today on a digital ecosystem can potentially be done by an AI and an AI agentic solution in less than 3 to 4 years time, maybe 5, and possibly again cloning the productivity output of humanity. Almost instantaneously. Sounds like a pretty huge deal, right? So I think we need to get ready for this. Personally, my job at Altimetrik, and again, my teams basically worry about this day in and day out with our customers, and we basically embed ourselves into business problems all the time and just go into these digital ecosystems to make them better, more efficient. That is the first thing that we ask. How do we make this better? How do we make this workflow? How do we make this, again, X, Y, and Z persona, whether it's financial advisors or an insurance agent or a pathology lab or a doctor or engineer at for motor company, right? The idea of improving your life with digital tooling, and how do we make the application as friendly and as user-friendly, as productive, as helpful, and as human as possible. I
Yep.
think the ultimate
human part's
goal
key, yeah.
is that human coming to meet digital.
Yep.
And that's why I'm fascinated by, things like human-centered design, digital experience design. How do we make these experiences truly human? And I think that is one thing, and we're exploring a lot of those things at Altimetrik with our clients, and also internally we have a lot of, labs and cool, interesting research projects going on this, where we are trying to create what I call the UI for AI, right? Nobody has really figured that out yet. We're still talking to chatbots for the most part.
Yep.
Even though you're looking at a writing code chatbot, you're looking at a chatbot that's replacing Photoshop for you. But can you imagine if you can just start speaking out loud to a Power BI kind of solution with business analytics in front of you, literally in English, I want to see the churn on manufacturing defects in my factory today.
Yep.
And immediately post the right analytics, the right visualization, the right dashboard on the screen, and it actually is visually predicting that. Because again, to me, it's also something that we need to start making a little bit more of a change. And again, educationally speaking, at the company level, we go to our clients and try to explain that sometimes AI is going to produce ephemeral resources, ephemeral results.
Yep.
Right? That's the nature of it, especially with LLMs. They're just going to be giving you something.
Yep.
The best shot, right? That's why they're basically, it's a little bit of a gamble on convoluted neural networks. At the end of the day, connections in the brain of the system, right? So CNN's talking, multiple concepts, learning, ingesting all this data, and just giving you something back is the best shot I can get, right? Now, how do you make that persistent? How do you make that, more durable into time? That's a very interesting concept for us, and visualizing the actual results in a human, more familiar way than just like, hey, approximate a spreadsheet, to match this. And again, it's early days. Of course, AI is going to get much better. But there's still a lot of humanness that needs to come into play. Forget about AI solutions, but just even existing legacy solutions that, as they modernize with AI, I think human-centered design, overall design capabilities, understanding what's aesthetic, what's easy to understand conceptually, taking complex problems and breaking them down into, again, same thing with the AI or coding or business problems, same thing for, visual connections and things that you see in the real world, and how do you make all these things available in channels? Like whether it's a web app or a mobile app or your super awesome smart glasses of the future that, hopefully Apple comes up in, 10 years or less.
And then back into the enterprise too, how do you know that these results and the use of AI is driving your real strategy?
Exactly.
And I think, part of that is developing the right AI world frameworks for how to think about this. And I don't think we know what those are yet.
No.
But I think strategy to some degrees has to be distilled and be very clear and very simple. And one model I like is from Ben Horowitz, from Andreessen Horowitz. He's got a famous book called The Hard Thing About Hard Things. But his less famous book, which I actually personally like a bit better, is called What You Do Is Who You Are. And it looks at company culture and company values. And he talks about distilling strategy down into people, products, and profits, and take care of people, products, profits in that order. And if you can clearly define how your strategy affects those three areas, the people who work for you, the products and services you deliver, and ultimately your bottom line. And then you can metricate that, clear business outcomes, the right KPIs, and including making sure all of those dimensions are talking to each other. I think you then kind of have a first principles model that can survive for at least a while into this AI generation. And then, how you define these KPIs is also important. Like the classic example is like if you want more sales leads and you set a KPI for number of sales leads, you'll get more, but a lot of them will be bad. And so then you ultimately waste your salespeople's time calling up bad leads. So you always balance a quantity-focused KPI with a quality-focused one. And then for bigger enterprises especially, you then have to kind of balance that with a risk measure to make sure things don't go totally off track, particularly if you're in financial services or banking or something like that. You have to make sure you've got potentially those three levels of metrics, and that they all speak to each other and that they all fit within the company strategy. And especially in the age of AI and software, where setting this can then send an entire army of different agents off in the right direction. If you haven't set a direction, you don't have the checks in place. you'll potentially do a lot of damage, waste a lot of money. Definitely you can waste a lot of money in terms of CPU usage.
Yes.
But you can also waste a lot of money by shifting your entire organization
Yeah.
in the wrong direction. So people have to understand what's going on with these.
Yeah, it's almost interesting to me that folks are talking about some of these layoffs that are happening, and very unfortunate. Some colleagues have been impacted, and you feel bad for them. Most of them have been okay, but the idea of, again, the job that you're doing today will not be fully replaced by AI. But guess what? Your company may be making decisions with AI that truly has been pushing jobs away, right? Because again, what's the difference between a human and AI in many disciplines and many capabilities today? Not that many. And guess what? The AI may be better, right? So if a strategic decision is going to cause you a layoff,
Yep.
what's the counter on, well, I'm using AI in the wrong way?
Yep.
That's even worse, right? Because now you're basically using AI to replace human capability.
Yep.
And you can lay off AI agents, but you get my idea. I think the fact of the matter is, I think the economic attributes of this AI revolution is going to be more obvious as we move forward. I think agentic AI, mapping your real business, your real strategy, your KPIs, mapping all of those things that I think Asha is phenomenal at doing, mapping that into real results coming out of humans and coming out of AI agents coming together and being super powered. Everybody talks about how do you superpower my job with AI, but nobody's really talking about what happens if my colleague is an AI. Not yet. And I think a lot of jobs today, especially if you're a coder, software engineer, you already have colleagues. Your Claude 3.7 and Sonnet and others are in Cursor.
Yep.
Those are your colleagues today, right?
Yep.
And so you better work together with them and make sure that you can both train them and coach them as you would a junior engineer, and also use them the right way in a secure, enterprise secure way as well. I think there's a lot of things coming together with this AI.
Yeah, and I expect that companies can fall broadly into two buckets. One that look to entirely replace people and just to focus on cost cutting through AI. Mm-hmm. And those that focus on really empowering their employees and giving them visibility into the company's strategy and company needs and letting ideas bubble up from within the company. And it's, we've seen organizations getting flatter. Even the military, U.S. Special Forces went very flat about 10 years ago. There's a good book called Team of Teams by General Stanley McChrystal about that. We were fighting ISIS, and ISIS was using smartphones to communicate very quickly, and we still had this deep chain of command where strategy starts at the top, it rolls through the operational layer, gets down onto the ground for tactical layer. Oh, it turns out something's not right. Then it takes time to roll up through management and then roll up to the top. By that time, the situation on the ground's changed. Whereas ISIS was using smartphones, and they could really quickly get that information flow. Everyone was in the same group chat. And so the U.S. Special Forces had to actually not just change our strategy, but make the organization flatter, make information and decisions flow more quickly.
Yeah.
And I think that at the company level, getting that flatness right, while also attributing the right reputation and attributing the right credit to the right people. So you have to remove silos, remove politics, but still attribute success to where success is due. That's going to be vital. And then I think at the societal level, decisions that affect local people and local communities should be made as much as possible by the local people in those local communities.
Yes.
But they need the information and they need education. And historically, lawyers, for example, became a competitive advantage or disadvantage. Like if your team had a whole bunch of lawyers and another team didn't, you don't understand the laws, you don't understand what's going on. The U.S. had a very simple Bill of Rights, these 10 rules that made society function because everyone could understand free speech, right?
Yes.
And, now with AI potentially replacing what a lot of lawyers are doing very quickly, you almost have the ability now to kind of push decision-making into communities, into individuals, and how financial markets respond to that. I mean, already the education system is changing. Several states have put out, school choice, and parents are choosing to make sure their kids have financial literacy, because a lot of public schools, and my school, we didn't learn any financial literacy. You could argue that every single semester you should learn something about financial literacy, because no matter what, you're going to use money. You should know how to save. You should know what a mortgage is. But then it gets beyond that to like, when you're running a business, what is the difference between debt and equity? How do you insure against fraud? All of these decisions. And how do you allocate resources? How do you price debt? How do you price equity? How do you price risk assessment in a business? If people can like very quickly learn this, we could start to see like a really new era of entrepreneurial dynamism really coming up in the US.
Yes.
And to me, that's the most exciting potential future. And it's great to see education system shifting. Some of the accreditors are very open to things like competency-based learning. Companies are understanding their responsibility to upskill people. They're offering AI-focused courses for their employees. Even very old financial services institutions here in New York are making sure that their employees are at the cutting edge of AI.
Yeah.
And then, bringing back in the right partners and the right ways of thinking to make sure the whole business understands that. I think it's actually potentially very exciting if we can resist the urge to just let the AI make all the decisions.
Yeah. I mean, if we let AI become our overlord, we're all doomed. We're done. We're not aligned, and nobody's aligned. And all these big models are going to do whatever. When they start getting really powerful, we're all going to be in bad shape if we don't align society, learning, and again taking the AI as a sidekick and as a new integral part of the economic fabric. Again, just co-workers, right? So of course there is responsibility. I think, and one of the things that worries me, again, more from a personal level, is the fact that 5 or 6 AI companies are running all the models outside of the open source ones. That worries me quite a bit. The centralization of or re-centralization of AI or digital power is now being kind of internet kind of decentralized everything, made a massive push for economic incentives that work for pretty much everybody on the internet. For better or worse, you could probably get by. If you have a website, you get linked, you get paid by X, Y, and Z folks visiting, and then you would get incentivized, and those folks then in turn get the traffic. So everybody kind of, to an extent, wins. With AI, if we don't align it, who wins is the question.
Well, interestingly, I mean, there's a parallel example, I think, and Tim Berners-Lee, inventor of the internet at CERN, he has said that one of the mistakes he made was not including identity and payments in the original internet protocol. And so an example of how I think that went bad is you had these social media companies that came up. Facebook being an example, Meta, and instead of being able to accept micropayments from individuals, you needed to have these business-to-business relationships. And so the payer became advertising companies. And so that's an example of centralization. It was partially decentralized, but it kind of went into like, what do the advertisers want? And so the algorithms, to some extent, feed me what I want. But they also put me in a state that works for the advertiser. They induce sort of insecurity, maybe a little bit of lust, a little bit of greed, and then throw an ad my way, I click on it, And so I think similarly what you're describing with the centralization of the models, I think how the business models unfold will be important. And I hope we can kind of get this next iteration a little bit better, but the centralization is for sure a concern.
I think, and absolutely. And by the way, I called what you just said, this is a clean podcast, so I don't want to use the word, but it's the S word, edification of the internet is what I call with what happened with all these ads and all these incentives being put on eyeballs and engagement and micro engagements and all these attention gathering things that are basically disturbing a lot of folks as upbringings in teenage years, because at the end of the day you spend a lot of those times that you should be probably engaging yourself with educational activities, physical activities, sports, socializing, family, making friends, and then you're instead just looking at the TikTok of the day, and we're all culprit of that, I think, to an extent. The only question that I would have is AI going to make that even easier, or are we going to go and find value with it, right? As opposed to like once the Facebooks of the world, again, nothing wrong with Facebook, wonderful model to made it work for themselves. But once Facebook model of AI era is found, what then? Right? Are you supplanting workforce with AI agents? Are you now mummifying entire generations with content that just continues to be more addictive and more engaging? Which are it's already happening. I mean, of course, all of these algorithmic social media engines, they already have machine learning, the best machine learning teams in the world, and they've been using AI for 20 years or 15 years. So it's not like it's news to them.
Yep.
But interestingly enough, for me, I think as we talk about beyond next, right? And we can have a little game after this as a section of the podcast where we can kind of discuss the what's beyond the next thing. But as the title implies, right, for us, Altimetrik is really, very, very proud of the kind of things that we do for our clients is, again, cut through that noise.
Yep.
Right. We're not going to be following the rabbit hole and what's trendy, what's cool. We're going to look at your foundational aspects of your business. We're going to identify those use cases. We're going to set up that single source of truth. We're going to make sure that your data is in the right spot, accessed through the right APIs, with the right security, with the right DevSecOps principles and rigor. And then we're going to make an incredible user experience on it.
Yep.
And we're going to make the best user experience possible for the current business and for the future.
Yeah.
And we're going to advise you what that is going to
Understanding what the business is now, what are the needs of the business, who's working there, what are their skills.
Yes.
And we're here, how do we catch that Uber ride, I guess, to use our metaphor before, from A to B. And it's not just saying, here's where you could be in the future. You have to understand where you are now and then take people.
We're not even thinking about Uber anymore.
Yeah.
Uber is a problem solved, metaphorically speaking.
Yep.
We're thinking, what happens if you do Uber Eats?
Right.
What happens if you do Uber Eats for executives? What happens if you do Uber Eats for students?
Yep.
Like, we're starting to think of personas and multiplying these kinds of use cases in multiple directions that are basically revenue, net new revenue for customers or for our clients, right? So that's the idea, is to go deeper than what has been discovered so far, and not just settle on what's working, what's the cash cow for, for a SaaS that's running, financial advisory, on basis points fees that just, basically mummify, right, over time, and they just don't get any growth. How do you find the next set of growth? As we basically try to advise both digitally as well as from a business consulting standpoint. So let's do a quick turn here.
Yep.
As we call this podcast Beyond That Next, how about this? Can I throw you a few questions beyond the next and a subject? And then you can just tell me what's beyond next.
What's beyond next? I think I understand this. We'll see.
Let's play it. Let's see let's see what happens. If it doesn't, we'll just take
go with
this
the
off
yes
the roll.
and.
That's okay.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
What's beyond the next revolution of workforce enhancement with AI?
What's beyond the next
evolution of workforce enhancement with AI? What's behind that? What's beyond giving folks AI to fix their problems faster and more efficiently? What's next?
I mean, what's beyond that, I hope, is that the tools really understand the people and don't make people have to fit themselves into the tools, but the tools fit themselves to the people. And an example of how that might work from a business model standpoint is you could imagine a workforce platform that manages work, and instead of it, doing a social media model where it advertises at you, it might see how someone's doing with a certain tool and then offer an online course to get a little bit better at it. Or it might say, Jay, I see you're struggling at your podcast skill, but Ignacio's great at it, so why don't you go chat with Ignacio and he can coach you on that. And so I think that kind of rehumanizing the experience, both by giving people ways they can improve themselves and also connecting people within companies and within networks outside of the company. I think kind of rehumanizing this whole experience and helping people build these friendships across the globe with people that they may never meet in person, but also helping to solve problems locally. I think that's my hope as to what's beyond
That's awesome.
next.
Great answer. Nothing to add on that one. I love the rehumanizing of some of these things. Sometimes we've become too digital, and AI itself is too digital, right? So I think bringing it back, sounds great. What's beyond the next for digital education? What do you see around that? Because you're obviously very passionate, and you have a business that really helps and has run business around that.
Yeah, I mean, so beyond next for digital education is this much tighter link, again, between people and their own aspirations and their own strengths and the needs of the market. And I think education institutions need to translate that and create a safe place for people, especially people who maybe got traumatized by their childhood education or didn't come from the strongest of family backgrounds. How do you create these safe places to learn? but with an outcome focus of getting someone in a job, helping them build their network, helping them build important things. And I also believe that companies themselves that want to keep top talent are going to increasingly need to think of themselves as apprenticeship style learning institutions where they're helping people consistently get better, consistently use the latest tools, whether it's AI or something else, and making people feel that they're connected to the overall mission, and that they also have the right level of autonomy, and that they're, of course, getting paid appropriately, but also getting other types of opportunities that really make life worth living. So I think in some senses, and there's always been kind of these corporate universities, but I think that companies are going to end up taking on some of that responsibility, and it's not just going to be about like, oh, I'll pay for you to go to night classes. It'll be like several employees from across the company want to pick up a certain skill that has potential impact on the business. Let's go to the market, maybe bring in an outside instructor, outside curriculum, maybe some type of outside certification to help people feel like it means something.
Yeah.
And just constantly be investing in people. So I think that education goes kind of back in a sense to being tightly connected to work, but also focusing on the learners and the needs of the business hand in hand, not just, what did universities that were made a couple hundred years ago, what do the professors want, that's going to be less and less important for sure.
That's awesome. Yeah, I again, to me, if you incentivize the learner and make sure that the educational journey is both productive for the learner as well as society, and you give them again, I think educational systems today, they're very much incentive on curriculums, and here are the standards, and here's the SATs that you have to go through, especially in the US. There's a lot of standardization to the to an extent, considering states, of course, and they're running their own curriculums, but not to get into that again, but just the idea of having this incentive-based educational model where you can just be both recognized and awarded when you achieve something, and aligning it better to economic contributions and economic system would be fantastic. Because society today is a little bit like, I call it episodical, right? You go through life as an episodic set of events. Like you do this, then you do this, you do that. There is very little parallelization. It's very, there are some cases, of course, there's entrepreneurs out there and a lot of folks that have done wonderful things at different off times. But for the most part, society follows this pattern. Like, okay, you go to school, you do, then of course it follows, biology to an extent. But the idea is, if you have a college degree, why can't we incentivize entrepreneurship a lot earlier?
Yes, absolutely.
Why can't we incentivize other kinds of activities and curiosity seeking, things that you can do in your life before you get to retirement? Like there are such things that are like arbitrarily put there on the calendar for a human that don't necessarily need to be there.
And what's interesting is that there is some way that education signals that you might be a good entrepreneur and being worth invested in. The most famous one being like, did you go to Stanford, for example? And that works to some degree. There is some of obviously correlation between certain types of capacity and getting into these elite schools. But actually, someone who went to Stanford who has a certain personality type may not be the best person to run like a small diner or an Airbnb or an auto mechanic shop. And there's no real nothing from the school experience really can send that market signal. So going to Stanford immediately gets you in meetings with investors, and it increases the chances that you're going to get money at a higher valuation. Why aren't people graduating from each year with a sort of digital CV of some sort that says like, if you went to do this kind of business, you'd probably get a good deal on your investment. But if you went and tried to do this, you probably wouldn't be able to get investment. And that model, is the way it should be in the future, right? Like, why aren't we we're right now generating tons of data about, if you use TikTok or whatever, about what will distract someone. Why not generate data about what they might be good at entrepreneurially?
What incentivizes those eyeballs to be attracted to good content? And microlearning and passion pursuits and hobbies and things that are a little bit healthier than just watching somebody doing. Again, nothing wrong with some of those things, but if it's just that kind of content that you're going to go after, it is edificating. Is it actually helping your brain grow? And get curious.
And it's not, I think it's this idea of entrepreneurship is a little bit overhyped. I'm someone who really likes to think about new things. I am willing, for various reasons, to take on a high level of risk.
Yeah.
Not everyone's like that, and nor should they be. But we should also be thinking about, investing capital behind someone within a business. And the best businesses, they look at different business units, which ones are performing well, and they put more money in the ones that are doing well, and they shut down or spin off the business units that aren't doing well to somewhere where it can be more productive.
Yeah.
Warren Buffett talks a lot about getting the right managers in place, the managers who really want to run a business unit. They don't necessarily need to be entrepreneurial or be entrepreneurs.
Yes.
But why can't we guide people into different roles within companies, and why can't the needs of a company and the personality types that work well, why can't that be fed back into the school system so that a kid in the school is getting a project that's linked to that?
Yes.
That's like a really exciting future, that entrepreneurship is one piece of it, but also being a great individual contributor, being a great manager.
Yeah.
And there might be times when you want to go, have higher responsibility and likely get paid more, or have lower responsibility because other things are going on in your life, and maybe you get paid less, but you're more of an, how can you, flow through those different roles? I think
Here's a pitch.
Yeah.
Tell me if this sucks. Persona-based college education. Persona-based. Literally, just like we do software, and you pick, you pick your role. Are you an admin? Are you a user? Are you a developer? Are you a designer? Are you a data scientist?
A hacker, hipster, hustler,
anything. Just pick a persona. We'll do an educational plan just for you, and there's a college solution for you.
Yeah.
AI could be used for that.
Yeah.
Who knows?
And you could even, have group projects where you mix personas together, and they each have to do a different part of these group projects.
Wouldn't that be a better use of social networks, actually, thinking about it now for a second? To actually connect ideas. And of course, there are solutions out there that do this. Don't get me wrong. I think we all can probably agree on the fact that everything has been invented, but the reality is, are we getting visibility to the right things as opposed to just continue to, drone out? Okay, let's do one more.
Another thing I'd love to, before we go on, another thing I'd love to see that is currently not entirely legal is if you could.
Cool, I love that. Let's do more of that. More theme.
If you could adjust someone's student debt interest rate based on which class they take. Because if you take this class, you're more likely to actually earn more, and therefore you're more likely to have a higher chance of repaying it.
That is a cool idea.
I think everyone kind of knows that an engineering degree is more likely to get you hired than, say, underwater basket weaving.
Sure.
Or something like that. But currently, student debt's set at the same rate, and there's no signal for students to know which route they should take.
Yeah.
And people want to actually go for the easiest classes that are perhaps less challenging because they get an A, because they believe that GPA is going to signal to the market. But, maybe there's a way to actually use software and AI to adjust the signal. So a C in this hard mechatronics engineering class could lower your interest rate more than an A in, underwater basket weaving or whatever. I took a great class in college called Tai Chi and Chinese thought, which I really enjoyed the Tai Chi and I enjoyed Chinese philosophy, but frankly, it didn't link that much to employment. So that type of thing I think could be fascinating.
It would not be qualifying for those discounts on the interest rates. Let's put it that way. I find that fascinating. And then one more thought that just came out, just because you talked about this incentivization of good behavior, generally speaking, at the business, as a business manager, you do the right thing, you're going to get incentivized. As a student, you take the right classes, you get incentivized. Yep. I think that is where I believe this digital evolution, the next 5 years, is going to look like. Can we incentivize society to use AI the right way?
Yep.
Number one. Number two, can we actually make the AI companies and the models and the model makers to start driving a little bit more, again, OpenAI had the right idea until they decided they like money more. But I think that's going to be an interesting next set of challenges for us to align all these things, but also making sure, to your point, how do you incentivize the right behaviors across the society?
Maybe there's even competition among these model makers based on how their business models work. For example, the companies that are able to effectively meter AI and allow a company like mine to resell some of their AI usage, they're
Yeah.
going to have an advantage.
Yeah.
There's probably other ways that they could compete apart from the open source thing, which we went off the rails on, as you noted.
Yeah.
You know, other ways that they could compete, telling people and customers like, maybe some of them store data about you, but only you're allowed to access it, or if it's sold, you have to approve it and maybe even get paid for how it's sold.
Yeah.
And others would collect data similar to how the social media companies have, kind of in secret, anonymizing it to a certain degree.
Yeah.
Maybe there's ways that companies can get ahead and really say, here's our thesis of a values-based, human-first business model that goes along with the tech we're offering.